It's no secret that Claude struggles a lot with large files, and it's so frustrating when you have a chat going so smoothly or a Claude project set up perfectly that just can't take the context or files it needs to be the best it can be. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can give Claude way more knowledge. And not just more knowledge, but more accurate knowledge that you can rely on and even get exact citations from. And to make this work, we don't need complex automations or to build RAG from scratch. I've actually used this exact technique with custom GPTs, and now thanks to MCP servers, we can easily and quickly hook this up to Claude to now allow it to benefit from more memory and more knowledge. It's fast, clean, and most importantly, it unlocks use cases that weren't possible before just using Claude's standard knowledge base. If that interests you, let's dive right in. All right, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of setting this up, I want to walk you through conceptually everything that's happening here so you have a full understanding. Because I know that MCP means something to a few, but means nothing to many. You can think of MCP as a form of a bridge to, in this case, Claude, where previously Claude couldn't really access any tools outside of the interface you interacted with. But now it gives it a backdoor bridge that can talk to all kinds of apps. And what MCP does that we weren't able to do before is it makes that communication process with these tools a lot more seamless. So before, whereas you needed one key and you always needed to knock on a door of a service to use that service every single time, you now use that key, open it up, and now it basically has open communication that you can go in and out continually. So to make this technique work, for now, as of this recording, the only way we can do it effectively is using Claude Desktop. So you'll want to download that onto your Mac or your PC, and then we start from there. Once you've set up Claude Desktop on either your Mac or your PC, we're now ready to go to the next step, which is setting up a local MCP server. And again, just to not get too technical, it's basically creating a bridge that lives on your computer to go and speak to an end service. And in this case, this end service will be Pinecone, but not the normal Pinecone vector database where you have to manually add vectors, maintain them, etc. We'll be using Pinecone Assistant. And the way it's going to work is we're going to have an assistant that we create in the interface, and then we're going to upload whatever knowledge files we have. It can take these types of files, so PDF, docx, text, JSON, or Markdown. And then once those are set up, it basically does auto chunking of the documents. And if that doesn't mean plain English to you, it just means that it'll take the document, break it down into small parts, and convert it or translate it in a language that an AI can easily understand. So in terms of this process of RAG, it can be done hundreds of different ways with all kinds of tools. The reason why I default and my team defaults to using Pinecone Assistant is just for the average user that doesn't want to do the maintenance or write any form of code or set up an end-to-end automation just to do RAG. Pinecone Assistant has a front-end interface that you can just upload the documents and just manage what's in the memory from there. On top of the fact that we find it has a really good out-of-the-box retrieval rate, meaning the likelihood that you ask a question and retrieve good responses with citations is pretty high. So with that said, if we zoom out a bit, once we hook up the files we need, we're going to set up locally on our computer something called Docker and install Docker. And if you don't know what Docker is, I'm going to translate it as if you can just look at the logo itself. So you can see a whale basically having a bunch of components or containers on it. In the same vein, Docker will be our vehicle to basically create our own server to act as our container between Claude Desktop and the end service we'll be using, which in this case is Pinecone Assistant. And you can set this up using a normal terminal, but the one I'll recommend to you is Warp. And the reason why I'm going to recommend Warp is it's a very different type of terminal. It helps use basically large language models to help you debug installing things on your computer, because I'm sure you've seen tons of tutorials, even this tutorial will count as one of those, where everything goes so smoothly when you install something on a local computer. But in reality, you probably have different types of software, different versions of software. So whereas you can use normal terminals, I like to use Warp a lot because it uses LLMs to help you debug what's happening and suggest what the solution to those bugs are without you having to manually search it yourself. No affiliation to the tool, I just like to use it, and especially if you're not code savvy or technical, it's a really helpful tool to install things locally on your computer. Once you have both of these installed on your computer, you can go to the semi-final step here. And this is something you're going to enter in the terminal, or Warp in this case, and then it basically gives a command to Docker, that little container, to set up the server. And then I'm going to delete this API key after this recording, but you paste your API key from Pinecone, which I'll show you exactly where to get, and then you put the link to your host in Pinecone. And then at the very bottom, you have a command that says Pinecone Assistant MCP that sets this up. And then once that's installed and ready to go, you technically will have the server running. All we have to do now is let Claude know that it can access this tool. And if all we have to do there is if we go into Claude Desktop, there's going to be a settings tab and there's going to be a developer tab. For you, if you've never used MCPs, this will be completely blank. It'll just say edit config. If you go into the Claude folder, which it will take you automatically, you'll just have to paste the code that I'll show you in that JSON file, and then all of a sudden you'll see a hammer icon on Claude Desktop when you exit and re-enter it. And once this is all set up, this hard stuff, you don't have to keep redoing over and over again. All you'll have to do is just upload, create assistants in Pinecone Assistant, and just tell Claude which assistant you'd like to speak to, and then it'll be able to retrieve and speak to whatever files you want. So if this all made sense, then let's actually set this up now. So if you wanted to refer to the exact MCP documentation of Pinecone, you'll see it's right here, and you'll see that what we talked about before, which is this Docker instruction, as well as this JSON file is included by default, and all we have to manipulate really is just add our key, our Pinecone host. In this case, we want to reference, again, the key and the host, key, host, and that's pretty much it to actually get Claude to talk to this service. Now, the assistant is going to be very malleable because you'll just have to ask for the assistant or set up your Claude project saying, hey, I want you to always talk to insert name of your assistant. So if we go from there, so what we're going to do now is go back into our Miro board and just grab the instructions here to run this Docker with my API key and my host URL. So I'll just copy this, and I'm copying this purposely from the sticky note because when you copy paste these commands into sticky notes, the syntax kind of changes and breaks. So this will not be a valid way to run this. And I want that on purpose because I want to show you how Warp auto corrects the syntax without me having to manually go through and figure it out or go back to GPT and get it to create a code block that I can then paste. So if we go to Warp here, I'm going to open it up and you'll see it looks like a standard editor, but if you click on some of these different features, you'll see that it's LLM enabled. So it has very different features and you can actually talk to it in natural language and it will try to find what the best next step is. All right, so let's ask it. I'd like to install or activate Docker Desktop. Okay, so I'm just going to ask that. I'm asking that in pure natural language, which you can't do with a normal terminal. It will go through and try and understand what it has to do. So now it tells me that Docker does exist on my laptop, but if I want to open it up, I can click on Run here. All right, so now it opens up the app, and I have another server for local Olama, but in this case, we don't care about that. We just want to wait for this to set up, and then we'll go from there. All right, so now it's ready to use. It tells me that we're running this version. It's ready to go. It has one container, 2 images, etc. And notice here when I click on this feature, you can actually access different types of language models to help you figure out what's happening. So it has an auto mode, which I find to be the best, but you can also use DeepSeek, you can use 3.7 Sonnet, you can use 2.5 Gemini, which I find to be really exceptional features. So now I'll say, let's go back to here. Let's copy this. There's a 100% chance there will be an error here because there's going to be syntax broken. So I'll paste this and I'll click run. And what do you know? There's an invalid structure. But look at what it does. It actually shows me right here the template of what the code should look like with the fix. So let's just click tab and I'll click enter. And now the server is apparently started. So when we go on Docker now, you'll see now we have a brand new shiny little server and it's referencing this Pinecone image. So now this is ready to quote unquote be used elsewhere. Now, what do we have to do to get Claude to see it? Right now if we go into Claude, and let's take one of my examples that I'm going to use to show you the power of this. Let's go to demo 1. You'll want to stick around for demo 2 because it's going to be a really cool use case. So in this folder, we have some very meaty legal documents from the Canadian legal system in the criminal law, civil law, and a bunch of other files here. And if we take this and drag and drop it into the normal Claude, we will get the length limit error of death here very shortly. So the first one's fine, the second one is fine, and now we start getting that little warning that it might be a longer prompt, and now we finally get this beautiful conversation is 27% over the length limit, which is no bueno. This is the goal that we're trying to achieve to avoid. So if we close this out, let's remove those. The next thing we need to do is just go to Claude, Settings, and then you want to go to the developer tab. So in this case, you won't really see anything unless you've used MCP before, and you'll want to go to this section here, click on edit config, and this will open the folder automatically for you. So we'll click on edit config. It'll show you here, Claude Desktop JSON. And then I'll make sure to include this as well in the description below so it's easy for you to access and use. And if we zoom in a bit, there is no real rocket science happening here. So we got just a few components that you got to switch. All this is pre-written for you. You're just going to put nothing here, nothing here. These are placeholders. You're going to actually put the Pinecone API key right here, and I'll show you where to get the host as well. So you just need to paste these, and then once you save this file, and then you close Claude and run it again. So let's do that right here. We should get a hammer in this section. That hammer will tell us that we're actually speaking to this server in real time. So if we close Claude, all right, and then let's start again. Let's open up Claude. We should see Thor's hammer, and there we go. And if we click on Thor's hammer, we'll get something that says Assistant Context, so can retrieve context snippets from a Pinecone Assistant knowledge base. So if we close that up, so now we have access to this, and all we need to do is, one, I'm going to show you where to get the key and the actual server URL, but other than that, we just have to set up our assistant, and we'll be able to talk to many more files a lot more accurately. So if we go back to Pinecone here, and go back to the general screen, just so you know where to navigate to, so you're going to have Assistant, you'll click on Assistant, and then we're going to go and click on Create an Assistant. So we'll click on this, you'll name your assistant something. In my case, I called it Demo. And once you name it, it will set it up. And when you go inside here, you'll have a few things. One, you're going to have your link to the host, okay? And now they even have a URL for MCP, which is actually pretty cool. So this is the link to your host. And then to get to your API key, you just want to get it right there. So you're going to open it up, create an API key, copy that down, and that'll be exactly where you retrieve that. Now, in terms of their chat model, you can use either 4.0 or 3.5, and this chat model is what basically is translating the retrieved documents or assets before it actually goes to the end product, which is in this case our Claude Desktop. If we click on this folder right here, the files folder, this is where the magic happens. You'll be able to upload one of those 5 file types I mentioned before. It'll take some time, do some auto chunking, and upload. So I'm going to upload a duplicate just to show you the process. So let's go here. I'm going to upload some random report from my laptop. It's going to process, and once it's done processing, there you go. It's already 20% array there. While it's doing this last part, it's doing this chunking and re-ranking, all these fancy words for RAG stuff. And then once it's ready, it should say updated as of a certain date. There we go. And now it has the size as well. And now basically, when you ask a question to Claude, you can basically reference all of these files when asking that question. And the powerful thing is, unlike normal knowledge bases where you can upload 10 files, you don't really know where that specific answer necessarily came from, you can get that information here. So let's actually see it in practice. So let's go to one of these files here that we mentioned. Let's take the criminal law one. So if we open this up, let's go to, let's just stay on this page. So it says jury selection here, and we talk about a bunch of things related to jury panel, jury array, etc. And it's on page 60 of the document. So let's close that up, okay? And then let's go to Claude Desktop now. And let's remember 2 things. 1, the name of the assistant, and 2, the name of the actual tool. I just found with MCP and Claude Desktop that if you can mention the name of the actual MCP server or the method it's using, it'll help it understand, oh, okay, I shouldn't use my knowledge, I should use this other tool I have at my disposal. So if we click out, I'm going to dictate what we want to do. So I'd like you to do some research on jury selection from all of my documents and come back with a full explanation of what you can find. I want you to specifically reference the demo assistant from my assistant context tool. So in this case, it's not going to put the underscore. So what I'll do is I'll just say demo in little air quotes here. And then I'll say assistant context with an underscore. This should give it enough of a hint that, hey, you should use the MCP server for this. So when we run this, it should ask me permission to speak to this tool. It'll only do it once. Once we validate it, it won't do it again, at least for this chat. And when we click on allow for this chat, you'll see it's now sending a question to demo, our assistant demo. It's asking this query, jury selection process. If I wanted to make that query more detailed, I'd just tell it, no, send this exact query in quotes. And it's going to come back with its own response. And the result we get is a very beefy response on everything it knows about juries based on all these documents. And if you want to see what happened exactly and what information it retrieved, all you have to do is click on this little button here. And when you do that, and you click here and you do expand, you'll see all of the contents or all the different matches it had to our query. And what's cool is because it has access to all this data and all this metadata, if I wanted to ask something like, I want you to actually trace every single part of the answer you gave me and tell me which snippets came from which knowledge sources specifically, and ideally which pages. So in this case, I'll send the same thing. It should be smart enough to know that, okay, it already has this information or metadata in the thread, so I'll just go reference that, which it is doing. So in this case, it's now referencing the overview of the jury selection. It says source is criminallaw.pdf, page 60. We have the jury panel formation, again, same thing there. And then we have other parts of the documents that are mentioned. And what's cool is if we go back to our PDF that we use, criminal law, if you remember, we got that from page 60. So it is doing a good job there. It's coming up with other references as well, so page 61, 62, but I think all of them are in that same PDF. If I asked a more general question about the law, I would imagine I'd get very different responses. So this is use case number 1, but we can unlock a much more meaty use case and set this up in a way that's way more robust using a Claude project. So if we go into Claude here, let's go back out of here and go into the normal Claude. Let's go to projects. And what I'm going to show you is going to be alluding to a blast from the past from one of my more successful videos on creating a project for N8N. But in this case, we're going to try to do something for make.com. One restriction with my N8N templates video was I was relying on Claude's finite knowledge and knowledge base to provide as many files as possible. With this new tool, we can now surpass the capacity and power we had before. So if we close this up and we go into new project here, let's create a new project that's called make.com automation helper. And we'll go on create a project. Now, because we have the MCP server already set up, anywhere we open a new chat or a new Claude project, we're always gonna have access to it. So in this case, all we have to worry about is the project instructions. If we go back into our Pinecone Assistant, you'll see I've already set one up, so you don't have to wait for all of the uploads, called Make Expert. And what I did with Make Expert is a few things. So my team and I went through and downloaded a bunch of blueprints from make.com. And the reason why is Make is very different from N8N because it's closed source, not open source. So even if we use deep research, we're not able to usually create blueprints that we can just install. So we have a list of Make integrations that is super meaty, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. If you go into the folder again and go into demo 2, we have a bunch of files here. So we have hundreds of blueprints that we installed or used from their make.com template library. So if you go into make.com and log in it again. All right, so if we go into the templates tab here in make.com, it's going to basically show us this, a bunch of very commonly used automations. So one thing that came to my mind was, okay, if this is not open source, there's no wildly used documentation that we can reference for the JSON structure, what if we took all of these, put them in a Python script, kept just the unique ones, and created multiple JSON files that we could reference different types of automations, especially using different components of make.com? Would we be able to achieve and understand, one, how to create a blueprint, and two, can we plan a blueprint? So if we go back to here, one other thing that my team didn't like me for asking is going through pretty much every single automation possible in make.com. So this is a very meaty file. I think there's over 400 pages of every single method possible, of every single tool, and we did this all manually. And this is as of, I think, December. So keep that in mind, take it with a grain of salt. Things update, things change, but I wanted a way that I could quickly reference, let's say on a client call, what we can or can't do using make.com. Now, the extended thought is, what if we took this, put it in a knowledge base, along with a bunch of examples of templates, and now we could go back and forth with the AI to better understand, one, what is possible, two, let's map out an entire process. And 3, let's try to see if we can actually create a blueprint that we can import into make.com. So a bit of a meaty goal, very error prone, I'm sure, but just to show you the power of now connecting an MCP server with a vector database that has really good retrieval, it can open up new experimental pathways that you aren't able to do with just the standard way of using Claude. So just to reinforce the point here, if I just wanted to provide this very big PDF into the knowledge base, very shortly, I should get an error that tells me that I've already exceeded the maximum. And there you go. Failed to upload integration. There we go. So this wouldn't be quote unquote possible to do. But now, since we have it in our MCP server, all I need to do is maybe tell the instructions exactly what assistant I'm talking to all the time. So I don't need to keep coaching it over and over again. So I'm not going to be too fancy. I'm just going to show you just a layman's term prompt that we can use. Okay, so your role is to help me plan, design, and create JSON blueprints for make.com. Whenever I tell you an automation that I'm thinking about, I want you to first create a Mermaid diagram referencing the make integrations data on any integration that's possible or all the tool methods possible with said automation. And then I want you to help me create a Mermaid diagram to visualize what that process will look like. Once I've approved of that Mermaid diagram, then I want you to create a JSON blueprint to the best of your ability, referencing all the JSON files at your disposal using the make expert assistant from the assistant context tool. In this case, did a pretty good job of dictating the majority of that. I'm going to do just a few things here. I'm just going to say in brackets, or in quotes rather, make expert. Let's do that. So it delineates it and it doesn't send some weird requests with caps. So I'm going to say that. Okay. And then we'll do the same thing we did before. I'll do assistant context tool. And maybe I'll put these little bolds around it so it knows that I'm referring to this specific server. So we can take this for a spin and just see if it works. Let's do save instructions. If I really wanted to, I could also add more files here to supplement the project to be even more powerful. But for now, we'll just rely on the server itself. So if I ask it, I want you to use your knowledge to tell me every single automation possible just with 2 tools, Slack and Google Sheets. So if I send this and I send that, it should be smart enough to invoke the server. There we go. Allow for this chat. And now it's looking for the query Slack integration methods and modules in make.com. I didn't remember the Google Sheets one, but let's see what we get so far. We can always correct it and say, you know what, gather the whole thing. And anyway, okay, it did actually gather it. So it did it in 2 separate calls. So it's actually smarter than me, which is not unexpected. It sent a request for Google Sheets and then it sent a separate request for Slack. And now we should retrieve all kinds of information about the integrations possible. So now it's listening to me. It's designing a Mermaid diagram, which if you don't know is a bunch of code that you typically have to manually write to create a flowchart. But since we can use artifacts in Claude, it will visualize that Mermaid diagram for you and you'll see what we'll get. So now for both integrations, if you click on these artifacts and zoom in, you'll see it's talking about all the possible Slack triggers here. So it's saying from Slack, there's different methods of triggers. If you go to the very right here, we have watch messages in channel. Let me move this a little bit so it's clearer. Watch messages in channel. We have custom webhook. If you go to the right, new event triggered by Slack events, watch events, monitor messages. And then if we go to specifically Sheets, it'll see and it'll suggest how you can integrate the Slack notifications with well-known modules for the Google Sheets tool. So that's on the Slack side, and then on the Google Sheets side, it gives you an example of what a scenario might look like. So new Slack message in channel, make.com scenario triggered, you extract message data, then you take the message content, format data for a spreadsheet, and then it combines that data, add a row to a Google Sheet, and then send confirmation to Slack. This can now become your ultimate automation co-pilot to help you think through possible automations. So this was a very mundane example. Let's try to actually create a genuine process here. So let's ask it. Okay, so I want to create and pivot a little bit, and I want to create an automation that goes from receiving a Slack message to storing that message in a Google Sheet. But before we store that message, I want to create a new column in that Google Sheet that takes the message from Slack and then runs it through a completion step from OpenAI to manipulate and just understand what is the category of that specific message. And then in that Google Sheet, we store both of those assets, the original message along with the transformed message from OpenAI, and then we send a notification back to Slack that we have indeed incorporated this in the Google Sheet. So a bit verbose from me, but let's see what we get here. We should get first a Mermaid diagram, but we'll see, one, is it smart enough to know to invoke the tool, or do we have to tell it explicitly? All right, and from that single prompt, we got a lot of goodies. Goodie number one is it created a general breakdown of a Mermaid diagram of how the process will look like. So new Slack message, the scenario is triggered, we extract the message data, we send to OpenAI for categorization, then we receive the category from OpenAI, we prepare the data structure, add row to Google Sheet, and send confirmation to Slack. And if you're starting the automation journey from scratch, this is super helpful to tell you even just the mental model of how automations work, especially if you don't have the flow of understanding of how all these little bits and pieces work together. This will help you a lot. So that's present number one. Present number two was yet another detailed flow about the detailed Slack message categorization, so it goes more in depth there. And then gift number three was it referenced the actual context of all the JSONs we have in our knowledge base, and then it was able to use that to extrapolate a JSON file of our own that we can import into make.com. Now, it will not be perfect, I'd say even more so than Anyden. And the reason why, again, is there's not a lot of documentation, especially in its training on how to build these JSONs and blueprints in a way, because make.com is very meticulous about the IDs and structures, etc. But if you use normal Claude, I've never been able to create a functional blueprint in make.com from scratch. But if we go to actually copy this JSON, paste it in a brand new text file, call it something like test.json, we'll be able to actually import it. And let's prove it. So we'll go here, and you'll see this is what it looks like. And if you don't trust me that it didn't work from the first time, let's go to create a new scenario. We'll go to more. We'll go to import blueprint, we'll go to choose file, and then we'll go to JSON, save, and there you go. Now, this is broken. Can we fix it? Yes, because we do for sure have Slack somewhere in that blueprint. So let's go theoretically and go back to here. Let's go back and say, can we focus just on the blueprint that you outputted? Everything was perfect except for the very first module. The Slack watch messages was broken. So go through all your knowledge and all your documentation to make sure we have the perfect JSON implementation for that specific node. The rest were fine, but honestly, I don't know why you came up with an HTTP request, whereas for OpenAI, there's an actual create completion module dedicated for OpenAI. So can you try to incorporate that as well? So we'll send that, and then it will take some time and put together a brand new JSON. And we'll skip to the step of me importing what it looks like. All right, we initially received an error a couple times just because I think I was overloading it with how many actions it had to do with that one request. So I ended up splitting it into two requests, which is, can we just focus on the blueprint and let's fix the Slack thing. Then after that, we focused on the OpenAI module, which is, can we just use an OpenAI module instead of an HTTP request? It then edited the JSON, we re-imported it, and we got something like this, which looks a lot more sensible. Now, did we necessarily have to create a blueprint from scratch? No. We have all the makings here to just be able to plan, understand which names or possible modules we'll need to use, and we could probably just as easy click those bubbles and show up. I just more so wanted to show the power of being able to expand Claude's memory, that we can physically do things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do before, at least not as well. So these are two really good use cases, and you can use this for all kinds of use cases involving more complex documents, larger documents. And if you're curious on the Pinecone side, what are the limits for the different plans they have? They have a starter plan where you have 10 files you can upload per assistant, and then you have a file limit of 10 megabytes or less for those files. On their standard plan, you can do up to 10,000 files per assistant. And then enterprise, pretty much the same thing, just different limits on some of the details there. So that's how to use this. And one more thing to note overall is if you were to close your desktop or connection to Docker, you'll basically lose that hammer that you saw there because it's running locally. So all you have to remember is to run this request back in your terminal or warp, every single time you want to use it, assuming you actually close this down. So a little bit of an FYI I wanted to make sure that you knew about. So you can use this now to really expand the memory and more so the functionality of Claude, and you can use it to do it very accurately as well. So if you found this video helpful and super valuable, I'd appreciate you if you leave a comment down below. It'll help the algo, and I am guaranteed to have copycats about this exact same process, so it'll really help the channel and the video. And if you are interested in even more valuable tips just like this one, I share these kinds of things all the time in my early AI adopters community, so check out the second link in the description below, and maybe I'll see you inside. I'll see you next time.